I remember very distinctly Mark talking to me, and he would say, Mary was Walt's favorite. The guys hated her, but she was his favorite.
Welcome, folks, to another fine episode of the Pencil Pushers podcast, where we celebrate the love of the hand-drawn arts. I'm, as always, your humble host, Mike Rosado, and today I am honored to be joined by someone helping carry forward the legacy of one of the most beloved illustrators of the 20th century, Maggie Richardson. Maggie is the niece of the legendary Mary Blair, who is the topic of conversation, whose bold color, playful forms, and visual storytelling helped define mid-century illustration and animation. Her work with Walt Disney influenced classics like Cinderella and Alice in Wonderland, as well as the iconic look of It's a Small World at Disney World and in Disneyland, while her illustrations for Little Golden Books brought her magic into homes for generations. Today, Maggie plays a vital role in preserving and sharing Mary's legacy, curating her artwork, stewarding her archive, and helping new audiences discover the warmth and imagination behind her work. In this conversation, we'll explore what Mary was like as a person, why her work still resonates today, and why preserving artists' legacies matters more than ever. So, without further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Maggie Richardson. Maggie, welcome to the podcast. It's so great to have you here.
Well, thank you, Mike. It's nice to be here.
Yes, it's so awesome to finally get to chat with you. We had a good conversation. I think it was about a week ago, and you were a little nervous about the technical difficulties that
Yeah,
might
just
happen.
have that many. Expertise in technology is on the low scale.
Yes.
I'm better on my iPhone than I am with a computer. So,
We are just excited to have you here. So thank you for being here. I think you're in such a great position, obviously, to talk so much about Mary Blair, who, to give you a little bit of, a heads up, I have been following Disney animation since I was 9, 10, 11, 12 years old when I first really wanted to get into animation myself as an artist. And as a result of that, I absorbed all the books that would come through to learn about the art of animation through Disney Studios. And
that's a lot of books.
I do have plenty. And through that process, I got to learn about not just the animators that were, kind of at the forefront of the studio, but also the other artists that don't necessarily get I guess the accolades in the forefront as much as the classic Disney animators. One of those is definitely Mary Blair. And also, you know, I'm I'm of the age where I am old enough to have been a part of the Little Golden Book era, where I saw some of her artwork on there as well. And so I've always found her legacy as something so interesting and iconic because she was a female figure in the art world that was something maybe perhaps I'd love to hear from you, a bit of a difference than, this sort of male-dominated commercial art and animation industry. But before we get into that, I want to just talk to you about what it was like to have her as a family member, as your aunt. What was she like? What was your first memory of spending time with your Aunt Mary?
Well, okay, my first memory. That's a long, long way back, but that's okay because she was bi-coastal by the time I was old enough to really develop a relationship with her, and she was living in New York, but she would always come out for holidays to California because that's where she grew up, actually in California, even though she was born in Oklahoma, and then her family stayed in California. In other words, her
Hmm.
older sister, who is my mom, lived in Northern California. We always did so. And her twin sister, she has a fraternal twin. Not everybody knows that, and they don't look anything alike, and their
Hmm.
lives are not really alike at all. But they were close. Our whole family was close. But when Mary came out to visit, she would usually do something with the studio. She had something going on, and she would stay with my family in Northern California.
Okay.
So so I've spent a lot of time with her off and on during my childhood, and then in my teen years, going and staying at her place in New York.
So you got to see her intermittently, and so she at this time, like, how old were you when you really first started spending time with her? Was she in the East Coast at the time when you first had your first memory of her, or was she in California still?
She was in the East Coast. I was born in 45, so it's about 52, 1952, things like that.
Okay.
And she would come to visit. I remember one time she brought me a robe from Bonwit Teller. So she would bring me exciting things from stores that we didn't have in Campbell, California, necessarily.
Yeah.
We had Hales and Penny's and Macy's, which was great. But she had Neiman Marcus and Saks Fifth Avenue, things like that. So I came to really, really adore her at a very young age. My mom was wonderful. I love her. She was completely practical in many ways. Mary was an artist, and she was a fashionista. She taught me about clothes and the the glamour of a bi-coastal lifestyle as an artist, and of course being involved with Disney. And that's when I really knew that she was more than an artist. I mean, she was a person that was really making things happen in
Yeah.
in the Disney world.
Yeah. How did you feel? Like, the first kind of real touch point, what I'm hearing is the first kind of real touch point that you remember was probably around 6 or 7 years old.
Yeah,
What was the age when you started to realize that, oh, this is somebody of real importance here? It's not just my aunt who, you know, carries around a paintbrush and has their canvas ready to go.
I think it was during the time in my early teens when we came on with the Mickey Mouse Club, and then I knew that Mary was involved down south with Disney and some films, and she would come up and visit, and oftentimes she would take the Disney plane, which I got to ride on later too, and that was fun. But sometimes she would bring one of her best friends in those days, and she had several throughout her life, and this was Hazel George, who was Walt's
Okay.
nurse and confidant.
Oh, yeah.
Hazel was fun. Oh, they would come up, and we would just laugh and laugh. But I would ask Hazel. Hazel would she knew the Mouseketeers. I thought, oh wow, that's really. And then I thought, well, then Mary knows Hazel, so she's involved with all of that, and
Wow.
Mickey Mouse Club. So that was really my first reason to think of Mary in a different light.
Yeah. Now, did your mom try to explain that to you beforehand? Do you have any recollection of her sharing a bit about your aunt's career?
Well, all I kind of knew because all throughout our lives, my sister and me, my sister was older than I was by about 12 years. She had a different experience. She had her own childhood memories of Mary, and then I came along and I had mine, and then later on we had them together. But we would remember things like at Christmas time when especially me, I was little, and Mary would give me a piece of art that she had done because in those days she was also doing commercial art for
Yes.
gold and baker's chocolate, and some of them ended up with being produced and made into ads, and some of them she kept and gave for gifts. And she gave me a really nice little girl floating through the air, which I loved. And she said, you know, to Margaret, with love, Mary. And she even put her name on it. Now, I already know who she is. And in those days, I thought, I was kind of hoping for a doll, but okay, just. And then one year she made us all porcelain plates. They were all decorated, and she showed me on a rocking horse, a large rocking horse, because I always loved horses. I learned to ride before I went to kindergarten.
Oh,
So
wow.
she had an affinity for children of all
Yeah.
ages. But we all had these porcelain plates. One year we had large coffee mugs, and again I was painted on a horse on that one. The plate I have, the mug broke a while back, but I treasure the plate. But anyhow, that's so I did know she was an artist, but then when she began to become more involved with Disney, and I grew older and more involved in Disney films, and you know, Annette and Spin and Marty and the Mickey Mouse Club, and think, oh, Mary's close to that. So it was exciting.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So I feel like I need to bounce around a little bit. I want to give the listeners a little bit more context as if we could zoom a little bit forward, right? If we zoom all the way to where we are today and we'll backtrack and kind of go back and forth.
Sure.
Tell
That's
me about that. Great. Tell me about your relationship with her work today. What is it that I guess, your task to do to some degree, or maybe you're just passionate. Tell the listeners what you do with her legacy now, and why is that important to you?
okay. Well, what I'm doing with it, and I realize our family. I mean, we had the best Christmases and Thanksgiving, and we all got together, and I miss those people, and they're all gone except for myself and my nephew, who lives in Northern California. So, and even though he loves his great Aunt Mary, he's not involved in any of what I've been doing over the past few years. We really started, I think, with her legacy to go back even a little bit further was when my cousin Kevin was still alive, and that's Mary's youngest son. And we
Hmm.
started, people started talking to him about, "Well, maybe you want to do an art show with your mom's work." And for a while he was reluctant. He had all of his mom's work and his dad's and Preston's at his house. So his house was just filled with Blair art. But
Wow.
it was actually Pete Docter who encouraged him to participate in the exhibition at the Cartoon Art Museum up in San Francisco.
Okay.
And that brought out his art. It also brought out people like Diane Disney and people like Studio Ghibli. And then from there, we went on. He started making plans with Ghibli for an exhibit, which was to take place in another year or two. But in the meantime, we had already started with my cousin a website. And it was called World of Mary Blair. And we decided then that, well, we should we should photograph all of Mary's art anyway, which was all
Hmm.
at Kevin's house, and we had it all professionally photographed. That would be her personal art. That is the ones we had the rights to, not the Disney art, but her personal art. So we did all of that, and we began a website, and we sold in those days. This was about 2003,
Okay.
and it coincided with the book that John Kingmaker wrote, The Art and Flair of Mary Blair, and we were all interviewed for that. So he did so much to bring attention to right to Mary Blair, and it even began before that book with, I think it's called Before the Animation Begins. That's a wonderful book, and
Hmm.
he no, it's old, and he devoted, oh gosh, almost 30 pages to Mary Blair and her work, and she
Right.
was relatively at that time unknown.
Hmm.
So I always give John and credit for almost discovering Mary
Yeah.
at an early age before a lot of other people did.
John K. Maker he's an animator in his own right, but he's mostly, I think, known, at least to me, as an author and a historian of animation art. And for those that have have seen any kind of behind the scenes or art of Disney documentaries, you've most likely seen him being interviewed at some point or another.
Hmm. Yeah. And he's an artist himself and just came out with a
Yes.
book on his own art. and it's fantastic. So anyway, we and he always promoted our website when he would do lectures, and he was just so terrific about that. But the Chiclets really brought a real interest to Mary. Most of the all the animators got Chiclets from us, all the Pixar studios, and this was even before they merged with Disney. But those were good times, and that's how we actually, I think, started Mary's legacy before Kevin actually passed away. And then, unexpectedly, and he passed away just before we were going to be doing the exhibition in Tokyo. It was about 2008, and
Yes.
he was young, and but he had set up a trust, and he knew because of being with Jeannie and me and how much we loved Mary's art and all of them, that he entrusted her art to us, which
Wow.
was overwhelming. Well, number one, we did not expect to lose him at age 55.
Oh,
It was just boom. There we
yeah.
were with three estates: Mary Blair, Lee Blair, and Preston Blair,
Mm,
and in the middle of negotiations with Studio Ghibli for this fabulous The Colors of Mary Blair, the exhibition for 2009 that was scheduled for in Tokyo, which was
yeah.
huge and so
Wow.
complete and actually opened up another world for Mary's art. It was so well attended that they even held it over. And
They
then
did.
they held it over one extra day for Pete Docter, who was traveling at the time for Up, I think, in those days.
Oh,
But
wow.
yeah, it was a great event, and they attributed to in those days, the Japanese women just kind of coming into their own, taking their own on as far as equality,
Yeah,
and Mary was a champion for them. Or as a woman
absolutely.
who could transverse both worlds, a man's world, a woman's world, as an artist, and in a field that was really dominated by men. I mean,
Mm,
really was.
mm,
But she was given a lot of leeway, at least by Walt, maybe not by the
yeah.
other guys, as I found out later from Mark Davis. But anyway, so that gave Mary a big jump for her legacy, I think.
It's it's wonderful to, for somebody who, in my heart, I just don't understand why we place hierarchies on gender and color and races and religions. It just is beyond my thinking.
I'm glad.
I'm aware, though, of how different Mary's position was in the world of animation. Maybe in particular, I'm curious to see what you say about this, but also, the commercial illustration at large. I'm sure that her years at Disney gave her the confidence and platform and leadership ability with, you have this, you know, a kingmaker like Walt Disney is. I mean, anybody he's going to raise up to the top, they're going to it's going to raise their status automatically. You know, did you ever get a chance to talk to Mary about her legacy in that realm in terms of being a female in the animation world and having the power and backing of Walt himself, who wanted her artwork lifted up in a lot of the films that were out there? Did you get a chance to talk to her about any of that stuff?
Well, I'm not sure that she presented herself that way, at least to her family. She she was aware that she had pretty good position and a lot of authority, but she just kind of took it for granted. And she and Walt were close, I think, because of their genius, their love of children, and their imaginations. I mean, they just thought the same way. And I know Rolly Crump, I knew him. I was so lucky to have known him the past few years and be able to visit with him. But he said, Walt would he would light up a room, and so would Mary. And when the two of
Hmm.
them were in the same room, it was just an immediate electricity. It was just great. But she always cared about how we perceived her art. And as her family, she used to share the different projects that she was working on and show us pictures and little drawings sometimes. And she didn't draw all that much. It was mostly, painting and her
Painting.
concept art. And yet some people still refer to as an animator. So I'm trying to get that straightened out that she's really was not an animator.
Yeah.
That's
She's a
true.
conceptual artist. That's,
But I
yeah.
have to go to Wikipedia to change that, I think. But yeah, she was a lot of other things. She was a colorist, a stylist, a set designer, a designer, but not. She did the art before the animators got a hold of it, and
Yeah.
in that way, she kind of set the tone. And I remember in the
Yes.
early days, kind of jumping around a little bit too. But anyway, in the earlier days of animation and all the attention, it used to be it was the actual animated cells that got all the attention. And then they began to realize that what was behind the cells, because there were like millions of them for a few movements, what was
Right.
behind them was the concept art. And that was kind of overlooked before. And
Yeah.
then it wasn't. And so, but it took both of them. They all worked together. And that's what made it so great. And Disney was, wow, really a forerunner in all of that, I think. But
Out of curiosity, I'm curious of your take, considering that he was so unafraid, or at least appearingly so. He didn't seem to care about the fact that there was conflict within the rest of the studio, that Mary, who was, a conceptual designer and artist for the studio, that she had as much say as she did. Did you ever get the sense that, I'm curious about what your feelings are about the rumors that, that he was a sexist and all of those things. I tend to explain it like this, and I'm curious to get your thoughts too. He was a man of his time, and that's something that's important. But I'm curious, did you ever get a sense from stories told that, that he was as negative as some people portray him as?
no, I didn't. But I had a different, I guess, view of him. And my family was fortunate enough to know him only because of Mary, though. I mean, he
Right.
would send us things for Christmas and all of this. And I've told this story before that when my nephew or my cousin Donovan, who was Mary's older son, he would spend summers, and then I would go back east and spend summers with them in New York. So we would trade off. Donovan and I were about the same age, but we all one year decided to go to Disneyland, take Donovan to Disneyland because he was easily bored. He was a teenager. So Gary said, "Well, okay, if you're going to go to Disneyland, well, you should go by and see Walt." And we thought, "Oh, okay." So she arranged all that, and we did. And he spent time with us in his office, took us to the commissary, toured us around, showed us the model of Epcot, which was, he said, this, I got the feeling that this really had his heart. And
Yes.
then when he talked about Mary during lunch, he would talk about her with such kind of awe, the way he talked about and her colors, and he brought it up himself because I wanted to ask him about some of the films and Snow White, but he said, he would just think some of Mary's colors and combinations were just too wild. And then he would go out and see the sunset and there would be those colors. And he just had such great admiration and affection for her. Not and not just Mary, it was also some of his greatest confidence was, with women. Hazel George,
Yeah,
he was very close to Hazel.
right.
Trusted her, and so no, and I knew Alice and Mark and Alice Davis since I was 18. I mean, because I had spent time with Mary I was at UCLA my first year when she started Small World. So she
Wow.
was out in Burbank,
Okay.
actually, Toluca Lake. She was staying at the Toluca Motel then. And I would spend weekends with her from UCLA. And so we would get together and talk and go out to dinner at a place that's no longer there, an Italian restaurant, Sorrentino's. But we would also spend a lot of time with Mark and Alice. And
Wow.
just, they were so, Mark was a wonderful man. He had no,
He
and
seemed like it.
yeah, I mean, as far as giving equal time, male, female, he didn't have the ego that I think maybe some of the others had. But then again, I didn't know a lot of the other animators that well. But I remember,
Right.
and I'll jump ahead years later when she was awarded the Windsor McKay Award posthumously, and Kevin
This was in the
Blair.
2000s as well, right?
No,
I think so.
he died in the 2000. So Windsor McKay Award was about, I think, around 1996, 1997.
Okay.
And Kevin Blair, my cousin, was still alive, so he came down. He lived up in Northern California, worked at Lawrence Livermore Labs, and he came down, and we went with Mark and Alice to because Kevin was going to accept the award for Mary, and we had a wonderful dinner because Alice, wonderful, great cook. And I remember very distinctly Mark talking to me, and he would say, "You know, Mary was Walt's favorite. The guys hated her, but she was his favorite." And I thought, and I was proud and happy, of course, but even as much, I was so impressed with Mark for being so, you know, I don't know, so fair and so in his judgment of Mary. Of course, they were all close friends, but to say that he was Walt's favorite when Mark was he was one of the nine old men,
Oh yeah.
extremely talented.
Yes.
My experience of Mark Davis was he didn't have the big ego that maybe some of the others had, but I don't quote me on that. But I don't know.
Yeah. Let me interject really quick for the listeners. Mark Davis, as you were alluding to, is one of the greatest animators of all time, hands down. And of course, he's one of the greatest animators of all time because he's one of the greatest animators in Disney history. He's, as Maggie is saying, he was one of the nine old men. Nine old men was a phrase that Walt would use on his key animators, and it was a play off of the Supreme Court. I think Truman or FDR called them the nine.
I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah, it was a play on a negative term for the Supreme Justices, but it was a term of endearment for these animators. So Mark Davis was one of the elite of the elite. He was probably, except for Milt Kahl, he was probably the greatest of all Disney animators. So anyway, yeah. So you were
I
saying.
I would say so. Okay. So where were we?
So yeah, so you were saying that you were having dinner with him
Well,
and
I always when people say, and Mary was considered to be possibly Walt's favorite, but he came right out and said that Mary was Walt's favorite, and to have that come from Mark Davis, wow! I will never forget that. But
yeah. It, what do you think the reason is that she was quote unquote hated by the others? Is it
Well,
because she was a woman and they were men, or is it because she wasn't an animator, or
I don't think it was the male female thing. According to the what I've read and the research, and she just was entirely, as my dad would say, a horse of a different color. She came in to a world where all of the films up until that point were proportionate, and they were, in other words, her style just was totally so different from what they were used to developing into film. And they
right?
didn't know how to do it. And Walt kept saying, no, you've got to get Mary's work on screen. And they just, I guess it was just a huge source of frustration. And I think Walt knew it. And in my opinion, I mean, even more than favoring her, I think he maybe kind of protected her a little bit because she had a hard time
Hmm.
with it. And I think that was part of it. I don't think it was a sexist thing. There was an awful lot of women that worked at the studios, not many of them with Mary's position,
Position.
but she was totally qualified for it. And she spent time in different departments and had, experience before too. But what she brought to Disney was so different than what these guys up until then were producing that they
Yeah,
just, yeah, I think it kind of rocked their world.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'd be remiss if I didn't backtrack and ask you about a pretty interesting note that you just said conversationally, which is the fact that you rode in the Disney plane.
Mm. Yeah.
How did that come about?
Okay. Well, as I told you, so when Mary would spend a lot of time working on Small World, and she would stay down there and, in Burbank, and I was over in Westwood, UCLA, and my parents were in Northern California. Okay. So several times we take a weekend, and the little plane, I was think something like the Mickey Mouse Air Queen special. I have a couple photos of it. In fact, I have a photo of Mary in the co-pilot seat. It's really cute.
Oh,
They apparently had a lab, a film lab, up in San Jose, and that's the airport. And my parents lived in Campbell, which is very close to San Jose. So the airplane would make hops up to San Jose to deliver film, and we would catch a ride and spend the weekend in Northern California. So I went once with Mary, and then once with Mary and Hazel. Oh wow, that was wild too. So we had
no, no,
Hazel.
you can't just stop there and move on to other things. Why was it wild?
Because Hazel was just, she was funny, and she did poetry, and Hazel wrote, for the studio. But Hazel was a woman, obviously. Her name was Hazel George, but Walt thought it better that she would write things. She wrote things for the Mickey Mouse Club. She wrote songs.
He did?
Absolutely did. But she wrote it under the name of Gil George. So it was assumed she was a man. But Mary, they did not try to make Mary into a man, and she got to sign
Right.
over things. But
Marty Blair.
and even Hazel said at the time, she said that Walt thought that was better career wise for her. And I think I thought, well, Gil George is a nice name, but she would sing all of these tunes from the Mickey Mouse Club, so I would love it. But no, and she was great at cocktail hour. She was a lot of fun. So that's what I meant. But she was fun. But riding in the plane, yeah, that was neat. It was a small plane, but
Yeah. I'm assuming I'm just, the kind of person I am as a creative, obviously I'm very visual and I can imagine all kinds of things. I can imagine the plane smelling like smoke and cigarette smoke and maybe cognac or something.
it had Mickey Mouse on it. I mean, you can't go wrong with Mickey Mouse painted on your plane. And it was so nice. A few years ago, they had the plane at D23, and it was on exhibition. And it's now housed permanently in a museum, I believe, in Palm Springs. I'm not sure where, but
Okay.
that's its permanent place. It's been renovated, and there were actually two of them at the time, and I believe this was the first plane. I have a Polaroid picture with a date on it, and it was about 1962 or three, something like that. But
Hmm.
it was fun, you know, propellers and
What do you recall about her experience working on It's a Small World, which was, I think she returned to Disney, right? At that point,
she was in New
she was
York.
independent at that time doing commercial work outside of Disney Studios and then came back for that project, right? He lured her back.
He did. They never really lost touch, and they always kept in touch. And like I said, he always sent the kids, the two boys, lots and lots of Disney Christmas presents, and the two of them, and they would back and forth, and they would visit. And Walt would come out sometimes while she was working on, well, one of the other films, and bring Lily, and they would all go out on their boat together, and Mary,
Lily, his daughter.
his wife,
Oh,
Lily.
his wife. I'm sorry. That's correct.
Yeah, yeah. So they were social, but there was this particular project that was going on for the World's Fair, and I guess they were working on it. And this is, I get Rowley's opinion of it too, because he was there working on it, and he said the day that he remembers the day that they were looking over plans, and I think it should be like a boat ride and lands, and then it needs to be pretty childlike, and he remembers the day that Walt said, I wonder what Mary Blair's doing. Mary Blair. And that's how it started. And so she came in at that point and started working with Rowley and on Small World. And so she would stay for long periods of time. And that's how I came to know what was happening with Small World was one of the times that I was staying with her, and I would stay
You
overnight.
were at UCLA at that time?
I was at UCLA, but I would come and stay all night at the Toluca Motel with her. And then it would become Monday morning. It was she'd go back to the studio, and I would go back to UCLA. But I wasn't driving, but it was actually Harriet Burns who came to pick us up. Mary did not drive in LA. Even if she did have a car, she wouldn't have. She was scared of the freeways, just like I am now, I think. But Harriet would come and take Mary to the studio, and then she would drop me off at UCLA. And then, but one of those days, Mary said, "Well, come on out to WED, and I want you to see the big model that we have of Small World." I said, "Oh, I would love to." When she said big, I
Hmm.
didn't know it was that big.
Yeah.
You could walk around it. So, and I've
Wow.
told this story before, but it will always be special to me. She took me around to the different lands and showed me, this is this land, this will be Paris, and we're going to have this over here. And she said, now over here, there's a gaggle, there's geese. She said, we want to put ribbons around their neck. And what do you think, Maggie? Should ribbons be, orange or green? What do you think? And, and it's like, you're asking me? But it just made me feel so special. And I don't remember what color the ribbons turned out to be. I think green.
All right.
But the fact that she would ask my opinion, and
Oh my
then
gosh.
come to find out, she was like that with everybody, really. Um,
Really?
I had met years later. A man wrote me a letter. He said, I was just a kid working with Mary on Small World, different errands and things, but she would ask people's opinions. She would talk to us as if our opinion mattered. So she was just known for that. And even my nephew Kevin always remembers because he's about 12 years younger than I am. So he was, you know, a little guy when Mary did Small World, but he would talk to her about what he thought. And he always claims that he got his sense of fashion. He's a fashionista now, and pretty much but from Mary. I mean, he can tell you years later what Mary wore for a certain event, what her jewelry was,
Wow.
what her outfit was. And I'm like, wow. So,
Yeah.
but anyway,
That's
that's,
definitely one thing I noticed, by the way. Whenever I've seen photographs of her, she always looked so in style. She
yeah,
had such a look about her. In some ways, I gotta say, if I had met her, I would probably be a little intimidated. It's mostly because she just looked like she looked like a star.
I know she always did. This was just her style, her look, and yet you would think that because she had a very angular face and very sophisticated. uh, Alice Davis, who did all the costumes, for Small
Yeah.
World, and they became very, very close friends too. She described her as tailored but feminine, which is, you know, and I describe it as sophisticated but warm, because sometimes
Mm,
sophistication makes you a little scared of people. But with Mary, she was always so warm.
mm.
That combination, it was just so compelling. But she always had that flair, and so and I know and Rolly Crump, who did the Tiki Room and Small World with Mary. They became close friends. He visited in New York, and during one of his visits, Mary said, "Well, yeah, this was during the setting up of the World's Fair, probably of the Small World."
Okay.
And she said, "Well, you want to go with me? I'm going into New York to show them my designs. I have to have some clothes made." He said, "Sure." So he went with her to
Nice.
a big, tall building in New York, downtown, and they went high up. And Mary brought her designs that she had designed for clothes, and they would bring out fabrics, and she would choose the fabrics that would turn into the clothes from her designs.
Wow.
But she actually designed a lot of her own clothes and, real couture. So Mary Blair style, but
Wow.
she also did a line of clothes. I can't remember the name of the company, but they were sold at Lord and Taylor for a while, and they were
Hmm.
some different outfits and skirts and things. So, yeah.
What part actually thinking about that, because it's certainly something that I would notice when I see pictures of her fashion.
Hmm.
Would you say that that is a part of Mary's story that you feel hasn't been told enough yet? And if not, what do you think the element of her that you think should be shared more that hasn't been talked about much?
She was big on collage. I even found a book in
Hmm.
her estate of paper sculpture. So she did a lot of, well, she did in the 60s, mid 60s, sculpture, paper sculpture, all made out of paper for windows in Bonwit tellers. And there were a lot of windows. And I think it was for Christmas time. They were just beautiful. I mean, just
Hmm.
really beautiful. But a lot of her later paintings contain collage. Like she would paint something and then she would build it up with a little paper mache and different. It had texture, it had depth, and then she
Hmm.
would add a couple of ribbons here and there. And even with her advertising, some of her best art. And Disney doesn't like to present it much because it was cigarettes, but it was the Pall Mall cigarettes way back in the early, oh, well, mid
Yeah.
50s. And it was actually, and as I remind people sometimes, it was before they put the warning labels on cigarettes. But she did these big kind of pop art cigarettes mixed with foods and shrimp cocktails on the Barbie, which,
It reminded me a lot of, and I think you've got, if people wanted to see, I believe you've got some of that on the website.
yes, we did
Um,
put some on.
But they
On the
the
Instagram, yes.
yeah, that style, and it's very interesting because mid-century animation and mid-century design in general, definitely was very much informed by the fine art movement, particularly when it comes to like, people like Picasso and, others that were into sort of like that really modernist, cubist type artwork, where there is an element of collage in a lot of the work as well.
Hmm.
Did she ever talk to you about her influences by chance?
Her own influences. Oh, as far as other artists, or just
Yeah, ones that
oh,
she loved.
she had she loved all art. I mean, she really, really did. But she also, which I just learned recently, when she went to school at San Jose State, she majors in art, but she majored in commercial art. She
Yeah.
always had a feel for, making her art, this is the way I look at it, even more accessible, more diverse, and
Hmm.
as it turns out, commercial. And I think like the Pall Mall with the cigarettes. I mean, that's where I think she almost went into kind of pop art. That was the time
Yeah.
it did, and I mentioned that to the there's a museum in Oklahoma which will be finished in a few years, and it's called the OK Pop Museum, and it honors,
Yeah, I've heard of that.
you've heard of it, and Mary Blair gets a big space in it because she was born in McAlester, Oklahoma, and
Hmm.
so I thought I would love to explore that dimension of Mary, her pop art, her, I mean, people love to think of her sometimes.
I'm sure at that time she was probably almost considered herself a modernist artist.
She always did, and the person who really resonates with her now, one of them, the artist, is Shag, which is, and you're familiar with Shag, the artist, yes?
Oh, you know what? I think I've heard the references through your work actually, but I'm not that familiar with him.
Yeah, his style is very mid-century modern.
Okay.
We always say, positive decadence. A lot of, in other words, a lot of fun and, you know, cocktails and cigarettes and parties and just a lot of social things, but against a background of mid-century modern art, which he loves, and he'll be doing a Mary Blair painting soon. Uh,
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
and
I'm curious.
he said, I would fail to try to emulate Mary's style. That's not what I'm about. I want to paint Mary in her environment. So
Hmm.
I sent him a lot of pictures of her, the homes that she lived in that they built
Oh, wow.
were way ahead of time, still are cutting edge.
Right.
The big modern home in on Long Island, and that was on stilts in a studio and just gorgeous. So I sent him a lot of that. So I don't know what he's going to come up with, but it's going to be terrific. And it'll be in a few months or so. So he just wants to contribute to her legacy. And what I've been doing is taking from Mary, what I'm pretty good at is just combining what she's already done, some of her work in advertising and personal artwork, and I'll take pieces of it and put it together with other pieces of art. And I designed some sweaters, like this one that I'm wearing. Maybe you can't see that very well. Let me show you the. I'll show you the front of it then. I have it. So this is part of the
Raise
juice.
it up further? Okay, yeah.
This is
Wow.
part of the Juice Girl, which was an ad. This is the back of the sweater, and
That's
this is
awesome.
well known. This became the mascot of the show, the exhibition in Tokyo, is Mary Blair's Juice Girl. And then, so I made that into a sweater. It's got a sleeve with Mary's signature on it. So just
Love
pieces of
it.
things. And then I took another piece of one of her art and made it into a huge, huge big cat.
Oh, wow. That is
And then the
so
sleeves
cool.
are smaller cats. same designs. And then the back, we have two cats eating out of the bowl.
Gorgeous.
So, and then I decided I'm a real dog lover, and a lot of people are, especially in LA. And a lot of the dogs around here wear sweaters. So I have this sweater. Oh, okay. This goes with the, this is the back.
So cute.
How you see the dog from the side. There's a little Mary Blair signature on one of the legs.
For those listening that don't get to see the video, we will have this up on YouTube, but for those just listening, she's just sharing these amazing sweaters with these pretty large illustrations that are spreading all across these long sleeve sweaters. And
Yeah.
then there are these really beautiful patterns that are going along the sleeves itself. It's really so cool.
Thank you. Okay. This is the one for the dog. And so what I did was I wanted, you see how the cat has a little bow around their
That's
neck?
what wouldn't she wear a bow sometimes?
Sometimes she did. She had a little velvet bow sometimes. But anyway,
Yeah,
this goes with the dog, and that little bow there to go with it. So those are made. I'm doing a Shopify, so that'll be launched. It's taken a while soon, but I also
yeah,
did some. I took. She did a lot of in the 50s, mid 50s. She did a series of handkerchiefs, about
okay.
25 of them,
Yeah.
and they were sold at Lord and Taylor.
Oh
It's,
wow.
so some of the designs were I took the middle of one of her handkerchiefs and made it into a. Can you see that those are zebras?
Whoa, there's this beautiful pattern of
Those are
these
cars.
zebras in this really very like curvilinear
Yeah,
shapes and stuff like that. So
you can
cool.
see that Mary's zebras, the stripes actually continue out from the body. I mean, unlike all
Yeah,
the other zebras you've probably ever seen. But
that's for sure.
that's what I
But
decided.
that was that's kind of speaks to the ingenuity, I would say, of Mary's art is that it really, as you were talking about earlier about like how imagination was just so important to her. One of the cool things about her style to me, and sort of a reflection of the times back in the 40s and 50s where she was being risen to the top in terms of prominence from Walt's perspective, she was always pushing the boundaries of what her imagination could show. I almost feel like in a lot of ways the kind of color development and the visual development of her work with Disney was a kind of a perfect medium for her because she didn't have to really kind of she didn't have to color between the lines, you know. She was
Oh,
able to be very
wouldn't you?
expressive, to create feelings almost as much as environments.
No, you
And
get
that was really,
get her.
huh?
I said you get her. Yeah, I said,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
no, you do, and that's what I want other people to get about her. She was multi dimensional, and so as long as I'm on the T-shirt, and this is what her
yeah,
well-known portrait. This is
yes,
with her iconic portrait from
yes. She was
1940.
a gorgeous woman.
She really was. I mean, just maybe not beautiful, but
She looked like a star.
she did. She had that
Yeah,
look, and she always did. So there's that T-shirt, and then there was another T-shirt. It's taken me a long time, longer than I thought by myself,
yeah,
to get these things going. And I thought I have it. I found a design that she did. That I thought, oh, I'm going to put that up for Halloween. And what it was is Mary did some scenes, some concept art for scenery. She designed scenery and sets for a Broadway musical that was not produced. It was called Coal Black and the Seven Dwarfs.
oh yeah,
It was about Duke Ellington's music. And in it, so I have the rights to that art because it's not Disney. In fact, Disney even told me that. So just to be sure, but there was one scene of the voodoo queen and a witch, and I
yeah.
thought a witch, good, we'll do that for Halloween because it was the scariest thing that I could think of. that Mary did, apart from the Headless Horseman, which I couldn't do.
Oh yeah.
Those rights. But anyway, this is that that shirt. So you can see this on
Whoa,
rich
that is
with
so
that. Yeah.
cool.
Oh, it was so
That's
good.
amazing.
And there will be socks to go with these t-shirts too.
Where can people go to purchase this stuff?
You'll be previewing it, but in about a month or so, I hope to launch. So it would be hoping to tell
Like,
people about it through the Instagram site, and then we have our Magic of Mary Blair website. As soon as I learn Shopify and all those things, it'll be on Shopify. So that's where it will be available, I think. Yeah, we'll just be like
I love it. As we only have a couple more minutes left
that.
here, unfortunately, I'm very sad about this,
Oh,
but
okay.
yeah, it did. It did. Why do you think, in closing, why do you think it's important for the legacy of Mary Blair, for you to take this mantle of sharing the legacy of Mary Blair? Why is it important to you? Particular, and why do you think that it's important for other artists like her that maybe don't get in the forefront as much, or maybe they, through just time, their the knowledge of them is sort of wanes. Why do you feel like it's important for you to take this mantle
No,
and
I
yeah, talk me
agree.
through that?
You have daughters too, right?
Hmm.
It's for the kids. It's for the what Mary started and experienced is not over yet. I mean,
Hmm.
I wish it were. I wish there were total equality. Like, wouldn't that be wonderful? And
Yes,
the creativity has nothing to do with sex or anything like it. Not one bit. So and the fact that a woman, as well as anyone, can pretty much do anything. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. And you know, I I could probably have this conversation for the next 5 or 6 hours. I have so much to ask you,
I
so
probably
much to
have more
talk about.
stories too.
Maybe we could do a part two at some point. Maybe after, after more products get online, we could have a second conversation and talk more directly about that and then tease out some of those other stories.
Good. And then and there's also a Mary Blair screenplay getting
That's
some
right.
attention. So that would be I can't tell you anything about that except that it's really good. And I'm hoping that it will be produced. And that through film, I think that's a great medium to get. Yeah.
I absolutely love it. And I hope that it gets picked up and it becomes a big
Yeah.
hit.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the appropriate time to have that second call. But Maggie, thank you so much for taking the time to spend some time with me and answer these questions that I've had in my mind for probably about 3 decades. So I finally
Oh,
get
I'm
to have.
so glad.
All right, well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Maggie. Maggie Richardson, everybody. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I wish you
Oh,
all
it's
the
a pleasure.
success with all the apparel that you're putting together and the new Shopify site. Go to share. What is the name of the website again, really quick?
It's magicofmaryblair.com. And then we have our Instagram site.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, we shall send everybody there. Thanks so much, Maggie, and I hope to talk to you soon, okay?
Thanks, Mike. Good talking.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.
Thanks for spending a little bit of time with us. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram for all things Pencil Pushers at the Pencil Pushers Podcast. And if you want to see what I'm up to, you can check out my brand studio on Instagram at MRC Brand Design and my own personal spot at Ikimodasor. That's my name, Mike Rosado, spelled backwards. EKIMODASOR. So that wraps it up for me. Until the next one, be safe, be kind, and see you next time.